The first time I heard my name over the radio, I answered without thinking. That's the part that still bothers me. Not what the voice said. Not how late it was. Just the fact that I responded automatically, like I already accepted that someone else was supposed to be there with me. Go ahead, I said, looking up from the desk. The radio gave a short burst of static. Then my own name came through again. Slower this time. Like whoever was saying it wanted to make sure I knew they meant me. After that, the channel went quiet. No request. No location. No explanation. Just my name, spoken once into an otherwise empty building. And by then I had already remembered something important. I was the only person working that shift. At the time, I was doing overnight dispatch for a private security company that handled patrols for a handful of office parks and industrial buildings on the edge of town. It wasn't glamorous work. I wasn't out in a car chasing anything down. I sat in a small dispatch office behind our front lobby, monitored activity reports, updated patrol schedules, took calls from guards in the field, and kept an ear on the company radio channel in case someone needed backup, a supervisor, or just another person awake to confirm they'd actually seen what they thought they saw. The office itself was in a squat one-story building between a tire shop and a self-storage facility. During the day it felt cramped and overused. At night it felt like a room someone had forgotten to turn off. The lobby lights dimmed automatically after 10. The vending machines in the break room hummed constantly. The air conditioner kicked on in long, uneven cycles that made the ceiling vents rattle. Behind my desk was a rack of charging radios, each one tagged with a site or a vehicle number. Beside that sat the base station radio we used to communicate with the patrol units. On a normal shift, there were 4 or 5 guards on the air at any given time. One at a medical complex. One at a distribution center. A couple rotating between business parks. Sometimes a mobile supervisor. That week was different. 2 guards had quit. One called out sick. One site was temporarily closed for construction. For 3 nights, I was handling dispatch with only one patrol car in the field until midnight, and then nobody but me after that unless an alarm came in. It was legal. It was stupid, but it was legal. My manager had framed it like a favor. It'll be quiet, he told me. You'll mostly just be babysitting the line. He was right about one part. It was quiet. Too quiet, really. When radio traffic disappears, you start noticing what usually hides underneath it: small static bursts, signal drift, the soft electronic hiss that never fully goes away. You realize how much comfort there is in hearing other people check in, even if it's just to say they've locked a gate or cleared a parking lot. The absence of that sound leaves more space than you expect. By midnight, I was the only person in the building. The last patrol unit had checked out at 12:03 a.m., his voice tired and apologetic over the channel. Unit 6 is clear. Heading home. I logged the time, watched his GPS marker disappear off the dispatch map, and locked the front office door from behind the desk. After that, the room settled into its usual after-midnight rhythm. Computer fans. Vending machine hum. The small green display on the base radio glowing on the corner of my desk. I made coffee I didn't really want, mostly to have something hot in my hands. I started working through a backlog of incident reports that had piled up over the week. At 12:41 a.m. the radio clicked softly. A short carrier tone. Then static. I looked up. Nothing unusual about that. Radios do that sometimes, especially at night when signals bounce strangely and weak transmissions half open the channel. Then a man's voice said my name. Just my first name. Clear enough that I couldn't pretend I'd imagined it. I waited for the rest of the transmission. Nothing came. After a second or two, I picked up the desk mic and answered. Go ahead. Silence. Then the channel closed. I sat there with the mic in my hand, listening to the empty hiss fade. My first thought was that it had been one of the guards, maybe someone who forgot they'd already checked out or was still in range and trying to ask something quickly before losing signal. But nobody called back. I checked the active radio IDs on the console. None of the field units were keyed up. The channel log showed an open transmission, but no source unit identified. That was unusual. Most of our radios were older, but the base console still usually displayed at least a unit number when someone transmitted. Here, there was only a time stamp and a blank source field. I stared at it for a while, then wrote it off. Weak signal. Interference. Someone with a bad mic. That explanation held together for about 18 minutes. At 12:59, the radio clicked again. This time I was already looking at it. No unit ID. No source. A brief wash of static. Then my name, again. Same voice. Same calm tone. Not urgent. Not emotional. Just direct. I didn't answer immediately. I listened, hoping to hear something behind the voice, road noise, engine hum, another radio in the background. Anything that would anchor it to a real place. There was nothing. Just a little static under the signal, flat and dry, like it came from very close to the microphone. I pressed the desk mic. Who's this? No answer. The channel stayed open for one extra second, as if whoever had transmitted was still there, listening to me, and then it cut off. That was enough to distract me from the reports. I opened the shift roster again even though I knew what it would say. No active units. No supervisor on duty. No one assigned to call in. I tried the mobile supervisor's number anyway. Straight to voicemail. I texted my manager. Radio line opened twice with no unit ID. Someone said my name. No callback. He didn't respond. It was nearly 1 a.m. He had a wife, 2 kids, and the kind of personality that protected its sleep aggressively. I already knew I wouldn't hear back until dawn. So I did what people do when they don't want to admit something is bothering them. I made it procedural. I noted the time. I checked the equipment rack. I reset the base station once. I listened to a weather band channel to make sure the speaker was clear. I even walked into the break room and back just to prove to myself that the office still felt normal. It did. Mostly. The lights were too bright in some places, too dim in others. The lobby beyond the locked glass door looked black and empty. My own reflection moved with me in the front window, enough to remind me that being alone in a place designed for more than one person always feels slightly wrong after a certain hour. The radio stayed quiet until 1:37. I remember the exact time because I just looked at the clock before the transmission came through. This time the voice didn't only say my name. It said, "You missed one." Then the channel closed. I sat very still. My hands were resting on the keyboard, but I could feel myself holding them there, like moving would somehow confirm that the sentence meant something. You missed one. I turned slowly to the report queue behind me. There were plenty of things I could have missed, an unfinished log, an alarm printout, a voicemail. Dispatch is built from small things that pile up quietly until one of them becomes important. I checked the alarm inbox. Nothing. Voicemail. Empty. Pending reports. Exactly what I'd been working on. Then I noticed a printed patrol exception notice sitting half under a clipboard on the far end of the desk. I hadn't seen it earlier. It was for a gate at one of the industrial sites that had been left unsecured during the day shift and needed a follow-up check in the morning. Unimportant. But technically something I hadn't logged yet. I stared at the paper. Then I looked at the radio. I told myself the timing was coincidence. There were enough unfinished tasks in that office that any vague sentence could feel specific if you were tired enough. Still, I picked up the paper and logged it. After that I stopped trying to work through the backlog. I stayed focused on the console and the channel log, waiting for the next transmission. It didn't come for nearly an hour. During that hour, every sound in the office became more distinct. The ice machine in the break room dumped a load of cubes once, sharply enough that I nearly stood up. The air conditioning cycled off and the room seemed to inhale around me. Somewhere out in the industrial park, far beyond our building, a truck downshifted and then faded into silence. At 2:31, the radio opened again. Static. A faint crackle. Then my name. Nothing else. I didn't answer this time. The channel stayed open. In the quiet underneath the static, I heard something that made the hair rise on my arms. Paper moving. Not loudly. Just the dry, close sound of someone lifting or straightening a sheet near the microphone. I looked down at the stack of reports on my own desk. The radio clicked off. I waited another few seconds, then stood up and checked the front door lock. Still engaged. I checked the back hallway leading to the equipment room and restroom. Empty. I even opened the supply closet because the idea of not opening it had started to feel worse than the idea of finding it empty. It was empty. By the time I came back to the desk, I was irritated with myself. That helped, briefly. Being annoyed feels better than being afraid, especially when you're alone. It gives you something to do with the energy. I sat down and called our radio service company's overnight support line. Not because I thought they'd fix anything at 2:30 in the morning, but because I wanted another human voice attached to the problem. A man answered after a long wait. I explained what was happening. He asked whether anyone else was transmitting on the frequency. No. Any nearby businesses using similar equipment? Not that I know of. Could be bleed over, he said. Could be atmospheric skip. Sometimes at night signals travel weird. That explains hearing traffic, I said. Not somebody saying my name. He hesitated just long enough for me to hear it. Do your radios use call signs or personal names? Mostly unit numbers. You ever say your name on the channel? Not unless I'm calling a manager directly. He made a noise that sounded like he wanted the conversation to end without admitting that he didn't know. Reset the base again. Document time stamps. If it keeps happening during business hours, have your supervisor bring the unit in. During business hours. As if that were the point. I thanked him and hung up. At 2:46, the radio clicked again while my hand was still on the phone receiver. My name. Then, don't leave the desk. I looked at the hallway behind me. Empty. The fluorescent lights above the back hall buzzed softly, the same as always. I didn't answer. The channel stayed open another second. And in that second I heard a sound I recognized immediately. The front office door handle moving. Very slightly. Metal under tension. Not opening. Just tested. The radio cut off. I stood up anyway. I know the voice had just said not to leave the desk. I know that sounds ridiculous to say out loud. But what made me stand wasn't disobedience. It was the need to prove there was nothing on the other side of that door. I crossed the lobby and looked through the glass. Outside was the dark parking lot, a strip of pale concrete under the security lights, and beyond at the quiet road. Nobody. I stayed there long enough that my own reflection overlaid the parking lot completely. Then I checked the door. Still locked. When I returned to the desk, one of the incident reports I'd left open on the screen had been minimized. I stared at the monitor. I had left it full screen. I was sure of that. The desktop wallpaper showed through now, dim behind the open windows. Nothing else had changed. The radio sat where it had been. My coffee mug was still warm. But the report window was no longer where I'd left it. That was the moment the office stopped feeling like my office. Not because of any one thing. Because too many small things had stopped fitting together. I sat down slowly, eyes on the monitor, and forced myself to reason through it. I could have brushed the keyboard. I could have hit a shortcut without noticing. I could have misremembered the window state because I was tired and primed to attach meaning to anything unusual. All of that was true. And none of it made me feel better. At 3:02, the transmission came again. No static this time. The channel opened cleanly. My name. Then, after a pause, "You keep looking the wrong way." Something in my chest tightened. Not a dramatic rush. Just a cold narrowing of attention. I looked around the room without turning my head too much. Monitor wall. Charging rack. Break room doorway. Front office glass. Then I looked at the channel log. The blank source field was gone. There was a source now. Base. I read it twice to make sure I wasn't misseeing it. The transmission had come from the base station. The radio on my desk. I picked up the desk mic and immediately felt stupid for doing it, but I still did it. "What do you want?" The channel stayed open. For 1 second. 2. Then a low burst of static rolled through the speaker, and beneath it I heard something faint and dry that took me a moment to place. Breathing. Close to the mic, close enough to sound like it wasn't crossing distance at all. Then the speaker cut out. I don't remember deciding to unplug the base. I just remember reaching behind the console and pulling the power lead from the strip. The display went dark instantly. The room felt louder without its hiss. I stood there with the cable in my hand and waited. Nothing happened. For almost 10 minutes, nothing happened. I told myself I had solved it. Faulty base station. Internal feedback loop. Corrupted channel board. Something old and electronic and stupid that had finally broken in a way that imitated intention. That explanation lasted until 3:14, when a voice came through one of the charging radios on the rack behind me. My name. I turned so fast the chair wheels scraped the floor. Every handheld on the rack was powered down except one with a dead battery indicator blinking faintly red. The voice came through that one. Wrong one. Then silence. I didn't touch the rack. I backed away from it like it might bite. That's the part people never really describe correctly about being frightened when there's no visible danger. You don't become dramatic. You become careful. Your body starts negotiating with space in small, humiliating ways. I didn't run. I moved the desk chair slowly to face both the front glass and the radio rack at the same time. I took out my phone and put it beside the keyboard with the emergency call screen open. I turned on every light in the office, even the ones we usually left dim to save power. I stayed in the middle of the room because corners suddenly felt too committed. And then I waited. At 3:27, my manager finally texted back. "What do you mean someone said your name?" I stared at the message for a second, then typed too much. More than I intended. I described the blank unit ID. The repeated transmissions. The source changing to base. The powered-down handheld speaking after I unplugged the console. He called me immediately. I answered on the first ring. His voice sounded groggy and irritated, but as soon as I started talking he got quieter. He asked the practical questions first. "Any sign of entry?" "No." "Front door locked?" "Yes." "You checked the back?" "Yes." "Anybody scheduled to stop by?" "No." He exhaled hard through his nose. "Could be somebody outside with another radio hitting the frequency." "From inside the base station?" No answer. Then he said the thing that changed the shape of the night. "Do not leave until I get there." My stomach dropped. Not because he was coming. Because he hadn't told me I was overreacting. He said he'd be there in 25 minutes. I looked at the clock. 25 minutes suddenly felt very long. After we hung up, I sat with my phone in one hand and a flashlight in the other even though the office was fully lit. I tried not to look directly at the dead handheld on the charging rack. At 3:33, the radio rack clicked. Not a voice. Just the small plastic sound of one unit settling against the charger. Then another. Then stillness. I watched them for almost a full minute. Nothing. At 3:39, the base station, still unplugged, gave a short burst of static through its speaker. Not enough sound to be normal. Not enough to be possible either. Then my name, spoken softly, almost conversationally. And after that, one sentence. He's in the parking lot. I moved before I could think not to. I crossed to the front glass and looked out. My manager's truck had just turned into the lot. Its headlights swept across the concrete and briefly lit the front of the building in white. I felt relief so quickly it almost made me dizzy. Then I noticed something else. The voice hadn't said, "He's here." It had said, "He's in the parking lot." Like it was telling someone else. I stepped back from the glass. My manager got out of the truck, looked toward the front door, and waved once when he saw me. I waved back automatically. Then the powered-down handheld on the rack behind me said my name again. Quiet. Close. Patient. I turned my head just enough to see it without taking my eyes completely off the front. The red battery light was still blinking. The speaker grill looked black and ordinary. Then the voice said, "Don't let him in." My manager reached for the front door handle. I unlocked it anyway. There was no hesitation in that. None. Whatever else had happened in that office, I was not going to stay in it alone 1 second longer because a voice on a radio told me not to. The lock clicked. My manager came inside fast, already scanning the room. He looked more annoyed than afraid, but that changed when he saw the unplugged base and the way I was standing in the middle of the office. He checked the doors himself. Checked the back hall. Checked the restroom, supply closet, and break room. Then he stood over the desk and asked me to show him everything from the start. So I did. The channel log. The blank source IDs. The base entry. The unplugged console. The handheld with the dead battery indicator. He picked it up carefully, turned it over in his hand, and frowned. "It shouldn't even power on," he said. "I know." He held the radio near his ear as if waiting for something from it. Nothing came. We stood there for a long minute in the fully lit office with the vending machine humming in the break room and the parking lot lights glowing through the front glass. Then he said, mostly to himself, "Maybe somebody messed with the units on day shift." He said it the way people do when they need the sentence itself more than they believe it. I didn't argue. He told me to stay put and went into the back hall to check the electrical closet where the secondary repeater components were stored. I watched him go. The moment he disappeared around the corner, the unplugged base station crackled again. Not loud enough for him to hear from the hallway. Just loud enough for me. Then my name. I looked at it and felt something I still don't have a better word for than helplessness. Because now it wasn't just happening to me. It was happening around someone else, and somehow that was worse. It meant I couldn't contain it by blaming my own fatigue anymore. The voice didn't say anything else. A few seconds later, my manager returned. He said everything in the closet looked normal. No signs of tampering. No spare units missing. No obvious reason for any of this. He stayed with me until morning. And that was the strangest part. After he arrived, the channel stayed completely quiet. Not one more transmission. No static. No clicks. Nothing. At dawn he boxed up the base unit and the handheld with the blinking red battery light and said he'd take them to the service shop himself. He told me to head home, sleep, and stay off the schedule until he figured out what had happened. I asked him one question before I left. "Did you hear anything before I unlocked the door?" He looked at me blankly. Like what? Anything on the radio. He shook his head. No. Then he hesitated. Why? I told him the voice had announced he was in the parking lot before he came inside. He didn't say anything for a second. Then he looked past me at the front window and said, maybe it saw the headlights. He meant it as a joke. Or maybe as a half-joke. The kind people make when they want to flatten a situation enough to stand on it. I laughed, because he was my boss and Dawn makes everything sound smaller than it was at 3 in the morning. But the laugh didn't change anything. He left with the radios. I went home. I did not sleep. Later that afternoon he called. The service shop had tested both units. The handheld battery was fully dead and had not transmitted anything. The base station had an aging speaker and a loose internal connection, but nothing that could create outgoing traffic or false source IDs. The logs from the repeater were incomplete, but they showed unauthorized openings on the channel overnight with no confirmed source. He used a phrase I still remember because of how carefully he said it. Equipment anomaly. Not malfunction. Not interference. Anomaly. He took me off overnight dispatch after that. Officially it was temporary, until they replaced the base station and had the whole frequency checked. Unofficially, I think he just didn't want me back in that office alone until he could tell himself a better story. 2 weeks later, another dispatcher started covering nights. I didn't ask him much about it. At first I didn't want to sound obsessive. Then I didn't want the answer. About a month later, he texted me at 1:11 in the morning. Did the old base used to make weird sounds? I stared at that message for a long time. The base had been replaced. The handhelds too. I wrote back, what kind of sounds? He didn't answer for almost 5 minutes. Then, never mind. Probably static. The next day he called out sick. The day after that, he quit. He didn't say why. A year has passed since then. I work days now for a different company in a building with too many people in it to ever feel truly empty. I don't miss nights. I don't miss dispatch. I definitely don't miss hearing an open channel in a quiet room. But radios are everywhere in some jobs, and once in a while I still hear that soft pre-transmit click from somewhere nearby, a delivery driver's handheld, a maintenance worker on another floor, security at a hospital entrance, and I notice my body reacting before my mind does. Listening. Waiting. It only happened one more time after I left that company. I was in a grocery store late, standing near the refrigerators in the back while an employee restocked milk. Somewhere overhead, the store radio squawked with the usual retail chatter, price checks, aisle numbers, someone asking for cleanup near produce. Then the speaker above me cracked with a short wash of static. And very quietly, under another person's voice and beneath the hum of the freezers, I heard my name said the exact same way. Not urgent. Not surprised. Just enough to let me know the channel was still open. I left my basket there and walked out without buying anything. I haven't used a handheld radio since. And if I'm being honest, the thing that still keeps me awake sometimes isn't the voice itself. It's the tone. Because it never sounded like someone trying to get my attention. It sounded like someone checking to see if I was still on the line.